Okay, folks, welcome. And Pam, there you are. Good to see you. So we have a spotlight talk today from Pam Calderwood, who's the program manager at Lockheed Martin. And she will, if there's time left, take questions. All right, Pam, you're going to be taking some questions as time permits?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. All right, Pam, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Harley. And thank you also to Krista and the CONFERS GSSF organization for hosting an excellent panel of both speakers as well as presenters. I know for me, it's been a very informative 2 days, and I'm very grateful. So I am part of the Military Space Advanced Program Department at Lockheed Martin in Littleton, Colorado. I'm leading the Augmentation System Port Interface, or ASPEN engineering team. Let's see if I can get it to move. There we go. All right. So what you see here is a picture of the Hubble. Growing up in Houston, I was very interested in space. And I remember watching the Hubble telescope launch with my family. What is really and truly amazing to me is that the requirements for Hubble that were defined in 1974 and 75 included on-orbit servicing. And that was over 45 years ago. As you can see here, this is a picture of the first scheduled service mission. That occurred in 1993, and it included a replacement of a number of parts to correct the optics. The infrastructure to go through and do this effort was considerable. In addition to needing a Hubble, they needed a docking adapter. They needed a space shuttle. They needed an articulating robot arm. They needed 2 teams of trained astronauts that performed 5 back-to-back spacewalks. They also needed various ground support. The total cost of this effort was in the billions of dollars. Now, the good news is the upgrade was successful, and it resulted in a great observatory. Today, however, we are moving into the future. And that future is a new model of space operations and logistics through on-orbit autonomous servicing. Future missions will be easily upgraded, both with on-orbit hardware as well as software. What you see here is a picture of our Augmentation System Port Interface, or ASPEN for short. The ASPEN is shown on an LM2100 bus. To the right, we have a CubeSat, and that's equipped, you can see it here, with our SAV. That's the Satellite Augmentation Vehicle Docking Adapter. The SAV provides the power and the data connections to the host. The top left shows Linus on a CubeSat. Linus is Lockheed Martin's in-space upgrade satellite system. We're very excited that Linus is going to be launched within the next 3 weeks. And it will mature our RPO GNC algorithms to TRL9. In the bottom right-hand corner, and it looks kind of small, is a typical ConOps. So in this case, the host vehicle would have an ASPEN port. A small SAT could be launched either as a standalone or in a rideshare situation. This SAV would then autonomously dock with the host, and it either exits after the mission, or it can remain to provide additional functionality. An example of a software upgrade would have Lockheed Martin's product line SmartSat, loading and swapping out the vehicle flight software applications. For hardware, the SAV can be attached to an optical head, providing additional capability to the host. Shown here is an ASPEN prototype. This is one of a family of our products. Docking testing is being performed right now in our Spacecraft Operations Simulation Center, or SOSC. It will improve the design maturity to TRL level 6. The Rendezvous proximity operations and docking design shown here is a simulation. It starts off with a satellite that has an ASPEN. We also would have small CubeSats that would attach with Linus. This would be giving us new capabilities. The CubeSat goes through and starts on its journey, traveling to within 10 kilometers of the host. The CubeSat then communicates with the ground and gets the approval to continue on its journey. The CubeSat starts its approach, and you'll see where it's going to switch to camera suite. There we go, as it gets closer. And this camera suite will be used for the docking. All right, at 20 meters, it will hold and get final approval to go through and perform the docking and perform the upgrading. Once it obtains this approval, it'll continue to within approximately 10 meters. And there you can see the vision on the right. It'll then go through and orient itself in a proper fashion based upon the cameras. Right, and there's a close-up of the docking. So using the Aspen adapter, the CubeSat docks directly onto the LM2100 and adds new capabilities as well as extends the spacecraft life. In addition to hardware, we have a digital twin of the actual adapter. This is part of Lockheed Martin's digital transformation. After TRL-6 is achieved, this model will be available to any interested party. We'll also provide you with our interface details. We realize that client vehicles are all unique with unique docking requirements, and this digital twin will be used for such things as helping analyze the forces that are transmitted between both the host and the SAB vehicles. So my final video today is of our initial docking test. Again, we performed that in our Spacecraft Operations Simulation Center. The SAV is oriented vertically. We used gravity offload fixtures to go through and simulate the space environment. There are 3 pedals on either side that provide a course alignment. You see the dampers, they reduce the imparted energy by the SAB to the host. There you go, you can see it start to get a little bit closer. And then it'll go through and twist in and align. We've got motors that perform both a soft and dock. And there you heard the motors release to do the undock maneuver. You can also see the electrical connections on the interface of both pedals. So in closing, the Aspen family of products will enable on-orbit autonomous upgrading of satellites to extend their design life. In contrasting to the Hubble service missions, the Aspen benefits are significant. They need far less infrastructure, and they also have a reduced time to upgrade. We're talking about days, reducing from days until minutes. So thank you very much for the opportunity of presenting to you. And Harley, I'll turn it over to you.
Pam, great, thank you. One real quick question. We've just reached our limit.
Yes.
A question from the audience. What services are provided by the CubeSat that you described earlier?
Right now, we've got both power as well as data. There was a announcement here recently with Lockheed going through and we're also investing to go through. So it will not preclude the transfer of fuel. Let's just say if I answer it that way.
Great, thank you. Well, Pam, thank you again. We're going to move on to our next session.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Join us if you dare. For the audience, this is going to be the last session. There'll be some wrap-up stuff and so on. And we're going to do, this is a process or a variant of a process that you all have been used to, or variant, as I said, of that. So this is servicing over the horizon. How will servicing capabilities enable the space infrastructure of the future? So in this session, several invited guests will outline several specific areas of space infrastructure, including exploration, space science, and space sustainability. We then have a panel of satellite servicing ecosystem companies that will be challenged to outline the ways in which servicing capabilities can contribute to the future, to achieving the future missions. Now, here's a role for the audience. Audience will not be asking questions, but you all are going to vote on which of the 5 presentations you think is most compelling, most moves you, and most sensibly will enable the future. So go to your keyboard and watch for your opportunity to vote on which of the 5 presentations persuades you the most. Now we have, as I said, 4 experts, and they're going to be the ones who are going to be challenging, discussing, asking to extend their observations and their presentations and so on. Rather than read these are also terrific folks, so read their bios, their complete bios. I'm going to read very briefly now all 4 of their bios so we can go right into the presentation, the pre-recorded presentations. So Vanessa Clark is co-founder and CEO of Artemis Space at Artemis. In space transportation provider. She leads the technical development and strategy for the upcoming 2022 mission and future Atmos services. She's going to be joined by Ms. Jamie Landers, who is the Advanced Programs Director of Business Development at Lockheed Martin, and identifies strategic, commercial, civil, and military partnerships, instituting an entrepreneurial mindset, which sounds pretty neat. In this capacity, she is focused on rapid technology development, aiming to accelerate the pace at which we germinate and fly new space technology demonstration missions. We next have Dr. Claire Martin. She works at Astroscale US in August. And since August 2019, she has been executive vice president. She brings many, many years, terrific years of experience in space technology, management, operations, and engineering to support the foundation and growth of Astroscale. And the last panelist is Dr. Melissa Sampson. She is responsible for strategic development and advanced technology at Ball Aerospace. She has extensive aerospace experience. And in her current role, Melissa collaborates with customers and suppliers to solve tomorrow's problems. So once again, what we're going to do is we have 5 presenters, recorded presentation, and they'll be very brief, and they'll be followed by questions from each of the panelists in turn. All right, so can we roll the first presenter? All right.
My name is Todd
Here's Todd Harrison.
I'm a senior fellow and director of the Aerospace Security Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. When I look ahead about 10 to 15 years in terms of what will be happening with national security space, I think that there are a number of trends that are going to continue to develop during those years, and it'll make the space environment very different than what it is today. One of the things we're seeing, I think, is likely to continue is space is going to become more transparent. There'll be less secrecy, not only because we're going to be downgrading the classification of many of our space systems, revealing more, but also the simple fact that space situational awareness capabilities are becoming more available to other countries and commercial actors in space. And so you're not going to be able to hide as much of what's going on in the space environment. I think we're also going to see much greater integration of commercial space systems and space services into military architectures and operations. I think we're going to see more airborne military missions that are going to be moving into space. things like ground moving target indication and even airborne moving target indication. We're going to see more of those functions being performed from space, especially during peacetime or even in conflict when we're trying to look deep into an adversary's territory where ISR aircraft of various types just simply can't go. We're also going to see a maturation of anti-satellite weapons, especially non-kinetic ASAT weapons in space. And then related to that, I think we're going to see much more open, candid discussion about defensive counter space systems and how countries are deploying those. And they're going to be selectively revealing some of these things in order to deter adversary attacks on their systems. Finally, I think that overall, we're going to see space operations become much more integrated into overall military operations, not just in the United States and with our allies and partners, but around the globe, including with adversaries like China and Russia. And ultimately, that's going to make all sides even more dependent on space for military and national security than they are today, which I believe, I'm hopeful, will lead to a more stable deterrence posture in space.
Great, Todd, thank you. Okay, we have 5 minutes now for comments from the panelists. Folks, raise your hand. You should have a hand raising option for in front of you there. So raise your hand if you've got a comment or challenge or want to push back further. Anybody, any one of you have a question? Yeah. Jamie.
Thanks so much, Harley, and thanks to Todd for his visionary comments and to all my fellow panelists. I'm really excited to be here. It's like a fun game show, in my opinion. So, I agree with Todd. Space is going to become more contested. And really what I heard him say is that we need to have a level of interoperability and agility for our space assets in order to create resiliency within our space domain awareness, our ability to create new objects on orbit, to augment them, to secure them, and to defend against our adversaries. Things like the Aspen port, which we saw just in the last video, really highlight the ability to augment your satellite on orbit so it's no longer atrophying or going out of date when new technology comes online. There's also the ability to reposition your spacecraft or even upload new software so that it's performing a completely different mission on orbit. I think all of those are going to be critical in the satellite servicing future for defensive space.
Very good. Jamie, thanks. Vanessa, your hand is up.
So I agree with the video and I agree with Jamie's comments as well. One thing that I want to draw attention to is how do these developments affect other space operators? How do they affect commercial operators and civil operators? And I think that this is part of the, let's say, core mission of CONFERS. Like, we really need standards and rules of the road so that we can relatively early in an operation detect if something is happening that could be nefarious and allow operators like Artemis and Astroscale to do commercial operations without arousing any conflict or alarm. And so I think that these developments go hand in hand with CONFERS and the work that the group is doing here with standards and policy.
Okay, great. Any other questions, comments, observations? I have one. I think my own experiences, which is very limited in the field that Todd was talking about, is that I think that transparency and shared standards and practices may be a seriously difficult challenge to overcome. I mean, the world in which we live in, both with your allies and with your adversaries, a serious challenge, but Todd described, I think, a very desirable future. Last call for questions. I have no problem if we are moving ahead. Okay, so our next presentation will be in space transportation. Let us go.
This is Steve Bucky Buteau, Space Portfolio Director for the Defense Innovation Unit. My vision for space in the next 20 years is relatively optimistic based on the many technological advancements we bear witness to today. Within the last year, a growing number of U.S. commercial companies have successfully reached orbit, as have many private citizens, including Sir Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, and the crew of Inspiration 4. 8 space startups have recently gone public via SPAC transactions that brought an additional $3.5 billion of private investment into the U.S. commercial space sector. The Spacex Starship successfully launched and landed in Boca Chica, Texas, taking reusability to a whole new scale. And companies such as Planet, Capella, and many others are providing new insights and awareness of natural and man-made threats impacting lives, the economy, and our environment. We are standing at the threshold of an extraordinary new era in space, but this opportunity is challenged by a rising strategic competition with China, an authoritarian regime that does not share our values of freedom, free markets based on private property, or equality. Ultimately, sustaining U.S. leadership will be hinged on a whole-of-nation North Star vision that unifies and advances commercial, civil, and national security space together for the benefit of all who believe in peace, freedom, and self-determination. We can and will succeed. In the next 20 years, we will see human activity in orbit and on the moon, new advancements in propulsion technology that will enable direct transit to and from Mars, and more nations achieving spacefaring status, which will help to unify humanity towards the preservation of Earth while we advance to one day become a multi-planet species. The future is only waiting for us to act. Let's get started.
Okay, Bucky, thanks. That's terrific. And again, a reminder to the audience who has been presenting the most compelling vision for space servicing. Vanessa, you asked to comment on Bucky's comment first.
Thanks, Harley. So one thing that Bucky highlighted obviously was human spaceflight and exploration. But in-space transportation is a lot more than that. So Artemis is an in-space transportation provider, and our primary customers are satellites and payloads rather than humans. And one thing that I would like to add to augment Bucky's vision is that we really feel that in-space transportation is the first step for OSAM in terms of both technology advancement and also business case and commercialization. So before I come back to Bucky's, I want to explain that statement. So from a technical perspective, to do in-space transportation, we have rendezvous, docking, and refueling. These are all cornerstone technologies or activities that allow satellite servicing, life extension, and assembly on orbit. So the things that we're mastering help other businesses and other use cases as well. Now, in terms of business cases, we have customers who want to get to orbits that they currently can't reach with existing launch or propulsion architectures, or they want lower costs. So we have market opportunities that exist today without any more infrastructure or any changes to the business models of operators who we want to service. So I really feel that in-space transportation is really the first step in realizing the OSAM and deep space exploration vision that Bucky outlined. Now, one other thing that I want to add, where I really agree with him, is advanced in-space propulsion. So really, propulsion today falls into a couple of buckets. One thing that is really exciting is the development of advanced systems just for in-space transportation. So systems that aren't used for launch vehicle upper stages, systems that aren't used for station keeping, and systems that aren't used for the primary launch leg. These systems that can be high power electric systems, nuclear thermal systems, or nuclear electric systems that combine the two technologies are what we're using that enable us to serve our customers better, but then also enable what Bucky was talking about with rapid transit to Mars and the asteroid belt. And so I'm really excited that we have a business case that allows us to mature the technologies to also use for those applications.
Okay, very
Thank
good.
you.
Very good. We've got literally a couple of minutes left. Would any of the other folks like to make a comment? You raise your hand or just wave at me if you can't. If you can't. Ah, there. Hi, Claire. Go ahead.
I can wave as well, Harley. Hi.
Oh, okay. Sometimes I have a hard time seeing either, but if you would do both, I'll catch you.
Okay, no problem. I really just kind of wanted to kind of compliment Bucky on his vision. I love a big, ambitious vision, and this is definitely that. Sort of to supplement onto what Vanessa was saying, the ultimate goal of Bucky's vision was to become a multi-planet species. And to do that, we have to get past the gravity well. And the only way to do that, I think, is through on-orbit servicing. And that could be, on-orbit transportation is absolutely critical to that. I think in-space manufacture and assembly is also a key component of that, so we can start taking up piece parts instead of complete spacecraft. And then, as Vanessa said, life extension. We have to be able to use our assets more wisely in order to achieve this vision as well. But I'm currently cheering for Bucky because I'd love to be a multi-planet species.
Okay, great. Thank you, Claire. Any other quick, we got 1 minute left. Anybody want to make a quick comment? Okay, great, terrific. Thank you so much. Let's go on to the next presentation by Rudra Mukherjee from JPL, Large Scale Science Platforms. So go ahead, Rudra.
My name is Rudra Mukherjee. I'm a robotics technologist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. I'm also the founder and the lead for the Space Smart think tank, which is an independent and autonomous body of more than 40 individuals who share their leadership experience to envision a future of space enabled by the cumulative capabilities of in-space servicing, manufacturing, assembly, robotics, and transportation, or SMART for short. Our vision for the future of space is fundamentally different from the way we do it today. We envision space as an ecosystem of persistent assets that form a robust in-space infrastructure of supply chain, logistics, and construction. This is enabled by three fundamental SMART capabilities: the ability to move and maneuver freely without being limited by the amount of fuel carried at launch, the ability to manufacture and assemble assets in space and not be limited by what can fit in a single fairing, and the ability to service and sustain the ecosystem. Whether it be fuel depots or service stations in space, or large apertures and platforms that host payloads, we have to make persistence ubiquitous across all of space. The first step towards that may be to reimagine the spacecraft as a persistent platform. Shown here is one of many different ways of achieving this. Irrespective of the implementation approach, there are 5 fundamental steps that are common to the architecture of persistence in space. 1, we have to be ready to launch parts and pieces and not only fully integrated and complete systems. 2, we have to design payloads and instruments as modular elements that are robotically replaceable in space. 3, we have to equip the spacecraft with standard interfaces that provide data, power, comm, and structural connections to these modular payloads. And we have to buy into robotic assembly and manipulation as a regular element of our in-space operational paradigm. Finally, we have to enable and leverage cost-effective resupply or revisit missions to the spacecraft. If we do this, we can achieve new ways of operating in space. Consider Earth science as an example. The A-train with its many different spacecraft is the current state of art. What if we can put all those instruments on a single platform using SMART capabilities? We would be able to observe phenomena on Earth using spatially collocated and temporally concurrent measurements from those diverse instruments. This would enable us to model Earth as a system through deeper understanding of the coupling between different observed phenomena, something that we cannot do today with the state of art. And such a platform could map to many different applications across national defense, space science, and commercial interests. From in-space qualification and V&V, STEM experiments, to payloads for situational awareness, climate science, meteorological data, and even new business ideas that we haven't yet harnessed. Persistent platforms could host a whole range of payloads for diverse different applications. We believe our smart vision for space as an ecosystem of persistent assets maps to many current national priorities such as climate science, cislunar exploration, and protecting national interests. It enables new functionalities that build on commercial launch capabilities and enable sustainable space while spurring technology innovations. And there are clear strategic benefits of adopting the smart vision that range from growing the space economy, creating new jobs, STEM education, as well as increased US leadership and collaboration in the international domain. Persistence in space is the future. There is only one question: are we ready to embrace it?
Hey, all righty, folks. Here's another presentation. This will be interesting to see the votes on all 5 of these. Okay, Melissa, would you like to comment on Rudra's presentation?
Great. Thanks, Harley. This particular vision really resonates with me. It ties together the 2 other visions that we've seen. In space transportation is a very important part of this, as well as potential national security applications. In looking at persistent platforms, and particularly the concept of modular instruments and payloads, that brings us the ability to repair, replace, and upgrade payloads and instruments autonomously, utilizing on-orbit satellite servicing. Concurrent science measurements as well off of a single platform would greatly increase our ability to understand not only our Earth, but also the solar system around us. Currently today, there's only so many instruments that you can put on a single satellite. That also greatly increases the complexity of that single satellite. And if an instrument fails, we don't have the ability today to autonomously replace it or repair it. With a persistent platform and the modular payloads, it also gives the ability for payloads to be launched when they're ready. So instead of a bunch of payloads waiting for a single payload, they can go up on orbit and start performing the science as soon as they're ready. And the ability to upgrade technologies, both in terms of hardware and software. The persistent platforms for science would be a game changer. There's always more science to be done. Thanks, Harley.
Melissa, excellent. Thank you. Other comments, observations? Yep, Jamie?
Thanks so much. I agree with both the vision and what Melissa said as well. And what I really heard was all about space sustainability. How do we create a more sustainable environment for humanity to operate in? And when I think about sustainability, growing up in the 80s, it was always the 4 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, and figure out a new way or repurpose, right? And so for me, I think his vision, the SMART vision, really does that. It looks at creating platforms on orbit that are not only modular and interoperable, but actually can be assembled and built. And I think one of the key pieces of that is not only on-orbit manufacturing, but the joining, welding, and assembly to create those large structures in space. In order to do that, we're going to have to rapidly demonstrate the capability of building 20-meter, 100-meter, 350-meter, a football field, and more objects on orbit. In order to do that, we need to understand and characterize how both metal and composites are going to perform in a zero-G environment. I would love to see that as a future demonstration.
Making a great case. Okay, we got about 2 minutes left. Anybody else want to make a comment, an observation? Yeah, Vanessa.
So one thing that I really liked about this vision is that it acknowledges that how we do business today and how we operate today is really constraining. And it presents ways to remove those constraints, like in space transportation, on-orbit assembly, like the first steps that he outlined, like really allow us to move away from a fair and constraining what a spacecraft or a space platform looks like. And like that first step is really what feeds into the rest of his vision. And that's something that I really agree with and that I'm sure we're all working towards.
Okay, great. Excellent, Vanessa. Thank you. 1 minute left. Anybody else want to make the 1 minute equivalent comment? Okay, great. Let's go. Thank you. Let's go to the next presentation, which will be by Mike Gold. He's going to be talking about cislunar space and exploration.
Good afternoon, and thank you to CONFERS for organizing the Global Satellite Servicing Forum and all of you for participating in this important dialogue. My name is Mike Gold, and I'm the Executive Vice President for Civil Space and External Affairs at Redwire Space. Before joining Redwire, I served as NASA's Associate Administrator for Space Policy and Partnerships, as well as Acting Associate Administrator for NASA's Office of International and Interagency Relations. But most important of all, I'm a Red Sox fan. While it pains me to quote a New York Yankee, I think Yogi Berra's famous statement that it's tough to make predictions, particularly about the future, is apropos. However, I'm willing to defy Yogi's warning and take such a risk to make predictions because I believe in humanity's future in space. We are experiencing a second golden age of space development. And in 15 to 20 years, I'm confident that the seeds we are planting today will germinate, creating a dynamic and exciting future in cislunar space and space exploration generally. Specifically, I foresee satellites and robotics merging to create something entirely new that will dramatically improve communications and remote sensing. These new systems will leverage many of the in-space manufacturing technologies that we're developing at Redwire today. The satellites of the future will build themselves, resulting in gigantic structures in orbit that will, again, revolutionize life on Earth. Orbital servicing, assembly, and manufacturing will finally free humanity from the tyranny of the rocket fairing. Moreover, the private sector will have picked up the torch that was lit by the International Space Station, and there will be private sector space stations, some crewed, some crew-tended, and some completely autonomous, supporting whole new industries in space. New medical treatments and whole organs will be created in orbit. Advanced fiber optics will be produced, leveraging the microgravity environment, substantially enhancing future communications. Additionally, on our commercial space stations, new crops and seeds will be developed that can flourish under the harshest of conditions, preventing famines and giving countries new tools to deal with climate change. Generally, advances made via microgravity manufacturing, research, and development will feed the hungry, heal the sick, and bring humanity together in ways that we can't even imagine today. Moreover, the moon will have become a hub for the exploration of the solar system. Lunar resources will be utilized to launch a new era of exploration, expanding human knowledge at a pace unparalleled in history. Additionally, the first humans will have landed on Mars, building an international presence that will conduct research and, like terrestrial explorers, they will learn to live off the land. And all of this will be done in a peaceful fashion due to the global adoption of norms of behavior. Voluntary standards and best practices crafted by groups such as CONFERS will have evolved to become international regulations that are followed by all nations. Additionally, over 100 countries have signed the Artemis Accords, including China and Russia, uniting all spacefaring countries in support of core principles such as transparency, interoperability, avoiding harmful interference, the sustainable use of space resources, and the free, timely, and open sharing of scientific data. Also, while the Outer Space Treaty remains the foundation of international space law, per the ultimate goal of the Accords, Artemis-related activities and other exploration programs driven by China, which has now become the world's largest democracy, and other nations have provided the experience necessary to create new treaties that ensconce the principles of the Accords and the work of non-governmental organizations such as the Hague International Space Resources Governance Working Group and the Global Expert Group on Sustainable Lunar Activities. These treaties were developed by the United Nations on the peaceful uses of outer space, which now includes not only nations, but numerous private sector representatives from across the world. Most important of all, the Red Sox have won 15 consecutive World Series, and the Yankees haven't had a winning season in a decade. While I know these goals seem ambitious, I believe this future is achievable. I'm looking forward to working with all of you in the years and decades ahead to transform this future of peace and prosperity into reality.
Great. Thank you, Mike. All right. Very good. I think, Jamie, you really wanted to respond to. I know Mike really well. Terrific guy. Okay, Jamie, what are your comments?
Thanks, Harley. And yes, I really did want to respond to this for a couple of reasons. Mike and I are cut from the same cloth. We are both Red Sox fans, and we are both hopeless optimists. And when I have a bad day, I'm going to rewatch Mike's video over and over again, just to think of the bright future we all have ahead. But in that vein, I'm also going to quote somebody who was a Red Sox player and then became a Yankees player, and this one's from Babe Ruth. The way the team plays determines success. You may have the greatest bunch of individual stars in the world, but if they don't play together, the club won't be worth a dime. And really what that means is it is going to take all of us to realize Mike's optimistic, peaceful outer space where we all work together. And I am so looking forward to that vision. If you think about it, The space community is our baseball club, and outer space is our field of dreams. And together, we can build that prosperous future. We can do that through partnerships. Lockheed Martin has recently announced our investment in Orbit Fab and ABL. Being able to provide refueling services on orbit and responsive launch is going to enable us to continue to reuse, reduce, recycle, and repurpose all of our satellites on orbit. Really, I'm calling from the moon today because I loved his vision of the moon as a hub for outer space exploration. And in order to do that, we're going to have to make advancements in nuclear propulsion, harnessing the power of the sun with power beaming to solve some of our greatest problems here on Earth. Mike's really talking about an outer space that is for the benefit of all humanity. And I love that idea. Satellites providing predictive analysis and commercial weather in order to understand how our populations are affected as a whole. Growing food on orbit. I was a NASA tomato seed scientist in the 4th grade. We grew seeds from the International Space Station, and I'm passionate about food and understanding how we solve our food scarcity problems here on Earth with increasing our technology and understanding in outer space. As we build new habitats, both on the surface of the moon, as well as lunar mobility, and within Earth's orbit or orbits around other planets and asteroids, we can start to solve our scarcity or our housing insecurity problems here on Earth. We can really harness the power of technology development to rapidly start solving all of our problems that we have here, to combine as one humankind, and to push further away from our home planet and start to populate other civilizations and the stars.
Wow, Jamie, terrific response. I'm almost out of breath. That was great. Anybody we got about a minute and a half. Does anybody else have a comment? Yeah, there, Claire.
Thanks, Harley. I will refrain from offering any baseball predictions. That is definitely not my area of expertise, but it sounds like Jamie and Micah have got that covered. I really wanted to pull on one thread in Mike's vision, and that was his reference to policy and norms of behavior. In order to be successful in on-orbit servicing, it is absolutely a team effort across all different industries, elements of industries, as Jamie said. But we also need to be able to move forward the policy aspects, in addition to the technology aspects, and also the business side of things. We need those three things to all move forward together. And by working together and enabling each other, that is how we will succeed and start growing tomatoes in orbit.
Great. Claire, thank you. We've just about run out of time for this one. So excellent presentation by Mike, Jamie, and Claire's response. All right, next one up is Bhavya Lal, who's going to be speaking about sustainability and orbital debris. So it has already.
Hello, my name is Bhavya Lal, and I'm a senior advisor to the NASA administrator. I am delighted to be providing some closing remarks at the forum. So, in the 64 years since the launch of Sputnik, the exploration of space has offered immeasurable benefits to the world. Space-based activities provide global communications, navigation and timing, assessment of climate change on a global scale, very important for NASA, weather forecasting, and so much more. It would not be an exaggeration to say that space-based activities have transformed our lives. Now we are in a new age of space development, full not only of opportunities, but also challenges that we didn't anticipate. Let me give you some examples. On-orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing, an area very close to my heart, may upend our current Earth-centric paradigms, but will also force us to think about rules of behavior when we operate in space as fully as we do on Earth. Constellations of satellites will provide broadband to parts of the world never connected before, but that also brings challenges when tens or hundreds of thousands of satellites will need to operate in close proximity without colliding with each other. CubeSats built by elementary school children will inspire them to change the future of humanity but also create debris as we grow the number of satellites with little ability to maneuver. The list of challenges, many of them we still don't fully understand, is long, but at the heart of many of these challenges is growth in the number of objects in the most important orbits around Earth. There are more than 100 million of these objects currently in orbit, ranging from tiny dust particles and flecks of paint from satellites to spent rocket bodies. Many of these objects are too small to be tracked, yet they present the most near-term mission-ending risks to the operational spacecraft. NASA has paid attention to this problem from the very beginning of the space age. NASA was a founding member of the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee. NASA has been instrumental in supporting the US delegation to the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, called COPUOS, to develop the COPUOS Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines and the guidelines for the long-term sustainability of outer space activities. NASA has prompted the US government Orbital Debris Mitigation Standard Practices, ODMSP, with the space community. NASA also recognizes that the debris problem requires mitigation beyond shielding spacecraft against penetration by small debris. For debris objects large enough to be tracked, NASA works with our DoD and commercial partners to ensure avoidance of close approaches that can be predicted and mitigated via maneuvering. Since the 1980s, NASA has been predicting and mitigating close approaches with existing on-orbit debris in order to prevent collisions that damage or destroy valuable assets and create new debris. NASA recently released a new handbook on spacecraft conjunction assessment and collision avoidance best practices to document safety standards and best practices that consider maneuverability, tracking, reliability, and disposal. I have to say the list of our contributions is substantial, but going forward, we need to enhance the safety, stability, and sustainability of operations in the space environment. What does that mean? Looking out in the next decade or two, and this is where I talk about my vision, I see us having improved SSA, space situation awareness for debris, especially small debris in LEO, to better protect future space missions. I see us to have achieved better global compliance with orbital debris mitigation best practices to slow down the debris population. And I see us having established long-term goals combining mitigation and remediation to preserve the near-Earth space environment for future generations. Looking out a decade or two, I'm confident we would have achieved the first two goals. I find the third one to be a bit harder, which just means that we need to begin to work on it right away. A reasonable technical goal for the community is being able to identify and mature low-cost, game-changing debris removal concepts, as well as technologies in preparation for meaningful, large-scale environmental remediation. A policy goal is being able to reach international consensus on the long-term goal of the near-Earth space environment. Putting on my policy hat for a bit, I think we need to develop some common definitions and some quantitative goals for implementation. Should we aim for, say, limiting the debris population to X% increase every 100 years? Or should we aim for limiting risks to operational spacecraft to below Y% per year? Or should it be something else? We need to establish a long-term goal to manage the environment. So what are you waiting for? Let's get started. Combating orbital debris is a challenge, but of course, it's also an opportunity. Space is a big, diverse, and innovative sector. Together, we can come up with amazing opportunities that don't just involve technology, but also policy and other kinds of innovation. We are lucky that we have somewhat of an analogy, not a perfect analogy, that we can learn from climate change. There are all sorts of clever technological policy and regulatory schemes under consideration for climate change. Sequestration technologies, cap and trade schemes, regulatory fees, and so many others. Let's borrow ideas from other domains. Let's come up with new ones. I'm an optimist. Together, we can solve this emerging challenge and create a bolder and brighter future in space for all of humanity to enjoy. I hope to talk to you again.
Great, excellent closing on this panel. So Claire, thoughts about this?
Well, Holly, I mean, this is exactly Astroscale's vision, creating a sustainable environment for future generations. And we're already working on it, Bhavya. So I'd like to sort of pull on a couple of threads that she said there in terms of preserving that environment. We need both mitigation and remediation. And those are two of the pillars that Astroscale is focused on under our on-orbit servicing. So by mitigation, we're talking here about sort of end-of-life services and helping operators remove their object or out of a crowded zone, deorbit it completely, or even repurpose it going forward. And then for remediation, my Japanese colleagues are actually already working with the Japanese Space Agency, JAXA, on the mission, the first stage of a mission to ultimately remove a rocket body from orbit. The work at the moment is very much an in situ SSA approach to go and assess the state of a rocket body that's been in orbit for a very long time. Ultimately, I mean, I think we're on our way to meet this challenge now. We're working on the technology and the policy and the business aspects, but I see space sustainability as actually hand in hand with all of the other visions that have been presented. It's not independent. I think it is a necessary element of the exploration of the in-situ transport, of in-space transportation, of becoming a multi-planet species. I think it's at the core.
Great, Claire. Typically terrific. Vanessa, you have some comments.
So I'd like to add to what Claire said. So one thing that Bhavya mentioned that really would enable some of the business cases that Claire and Astroscale are looking at is somehow creating incentives. Obviously, there are some customers who are looking at Astroscale services, but the majority of satellites have no incentive to comply with guidelines or to exceed them in terms of debris mitigation and responsible end-of-life disposal. This is also one thing that we're really passionate about at Atomos, and we're working with other companies like Astroscale on things like paving the way to have policies that incentivize safe removal of satellites at the end of their life, such as surety bonds. Like, I think that there are very clever financial and regulatory levers that we need to pull so that the technologies and services that companies like ours are developing are more widely adopted. And that's really exciting. Like, I never thought I would be so intrigued by regulations and policy and economics in this area, but there is so much potential. And Bhavya's right. We should learn from climate change and schemes like carbon trading. Like, that is really exciting for me, as well as the technical aspect.
Okay, great. We've just about run out of time. I think we need to wrap it up. They were terrific presentations and as expected, a wonderful, wonderful panel. So Brian, I think you and I and Ian are up to describe what the results of the vote were.
Well, thank you very much for that, ladies. Harley, that was excellent. I really liked the closing out on a high note. I like the way that last session focused on the positive aspects of what space and satellite servicing can hopefully enable, and gives us all the motivation to try and resolve the challenge talked about earlier to make that possible. Looking at the results that just popped up, turns out that the closing arguments on the space sustainability, it did carry the day, it seems, as the one that kind of provided the most convincing argument of the need for servicing. So I think that's a pretty interesting, particularly for myself working for an organization that focuses on sustainability. That's quite heartening on that. So thank you all very much for that. Thank you all to everyone who contributed over the last 2 days of the conference. Thank you to our sponsors and to the audience, of course, for sticking with us over these 2 days. As we've talked about, we are just getting started in satellite servicing. We've made some significant progress this year. We're going to see even more progress next year. And we have lots of work to do on developing standards and policies and sort of building that customer base and fleshing things out. So please stay tuned to the CONFERS website. As I mentioned, we have some products that are going to be coming out later this year. And also keep an eye out for other events we're going to be hosting next year, including the 2022 Global Satellite Servicing Forum. So with that, Thank you to everybody, and we'll sign off here. Thank you.